Hello, everybody. Welcome in. I'm your unusual host, Ben Parker, with our usual host, Simon Short. We're going to talk about head coachings today in the NFL and jobs that may be open, some that are already open, then a few that are the seat's just so hot. But first of all, Simon, welcome aboard. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Ben. Nothing is better than hearing you proclaim at the top of a podcast, I am your unusual host, Ben Parker. That about sums up everything that we do here. So, welcome on everybody. Thank you all for being here. This will be fun.
Yeah, this is the Boxscore Network. Some of you may be joining us for the first time. We have a host of podcasts and YouTube shows, so go check them all out. We'll maybe talk about those at the end of the show. Simon, let's just jump right into the hottest part of the hot fire, man. I've got the Jaguars and the Giants sitting here. There's a good chance neither coach makes it. You pick a direction here and tell us if you think there's any chance that Peterson or Dable stay around.
Let's start with the Giants because I think that's a little bit more interesting of a conversation because in my head, especially with the Giants in line to get one of these better quarterback prospects in the draft, I'm not very interested in moving on from Brian Daboll. I kind of want to see what he can do with a quarterback that he can hand select and mold the way he wants and really get him a chance to plan around what he wants to do with a quarterback he picks. Because remember, when he came to the Giants, it was under the guise of he's going to fix Daniel Jones the way he fixed Josh Allen, and obviously that did not work out at all. Um, and the Giants, as a front office, as an organization, gave Jones so long to try to work through stuff that it feels like Dayball was the guy that brought Jones on, but he wasn't. So I'd be interested in giving Dayball a ball of clay. So I get the consideration of like it seems like the vibes and the whole team morale really went down the toilet after the whole Daniel Jones benching and then release, and that goes back on Dayball a little bit. But if I'm an organization and I'm about to draft a quarterback, I want an offensive minded coach that I think can do that and be consistent. And I would feel pretty good about Dayball compared to most of these candidates that are going to be on the market this year.
I'm in the same boat. Matter of fact, I was the leader in the clubhouse on the Keep Dable campaign here. Or I started this mid-season. It's been a little hard to stay on that boat right now the past few weeks because, again, you mentioned it with the whole Daniel Jones debacle, and then had that Buccaneers game where it felt like the team just didn't show up at all. And then you've had some more efforts that just didn't look very good. It kind of feels like the boat is burning, but I'm still on the side personally of I would want to keep Brian Dable here. I love his exo mind, and I still feel like this roster has holes, even though it's a lot better than it was when he first got here. All things considered, I'm inclined to just give him 2 more years with a young quarterback and let's move forward. I'm not sure that's going to happen. I know what the organization said a few weeks ago. I just don't put a lot of stock in that until you get down to the end of the season and he's still there. I'm inclined to keep him. I figure he's gone, but I could be talked into or out of either of those things. Let's talk about the Jaguars for just a second here. Doug Peterson, I think he's out the door. I just don't think there's any chance he stays. But do you feel any differently about that?
No, there's no shot. I mean, I'm very much surprised that he's there right now, but I just wonder from a timing perspective if, they come back from the games in London and what was that? That was the Bears and Patriots games back to back, right? That was week 6 and 7. They win the Patriots game and maybe just coming off a win and flying back over, it feels like a weird time to fire somebody. And then you start getting into right around that time as well, Packers game, Eagles game, they go on this losing streak. But Trevor Lawrence is also kind of in and out of the lineup anyway. So maybe it just felt like it was a lost season regardless. And if the guys are still mostly playing hard, which it's come and gone ever since they got back from the London games, just kind of ride it out, get through the rest of the season and move on from there. But yeah, I think the way this year has gone, and I've felt this way about Peterson for a couple years. He's a floor raiser as a coach, but I think unless it's going to be a wacky season, there's kind of a ceiling on there. So this just might be the year where the record's bad enough and enough stuff went down the drain that, all right, let's clear this thing out and let's start again.
I agree, and if I had my choice of flavors here, General Manager Trent Baalke would be out the door as well. He may keep it though. Some of these GMs, we see it in different places, man. They kind of get in good with the owner and they can really extend the life of their career in one place for quite a while. I want to touch on the three jobs that are already open. We know they're open, and just talk about real quick if you think anybody there has a chance to keep the job. You got the Jets, of course, let go of Saleh a long time ago. I don't even remember how long ago it's been now. The Bears, of course, moved on from Eberflus, and then the Saints have moved on. So those three jobs are all open. Any chance at all that the current interims there have a chance to hang on to a spot there?
Um, if you told me that one of these interims kept the job, I would go with the Rizzler, Darren Rizzi over there in New Orleans, just because they love continuity. They don't like to change things at all. And they're playing hard. And I mean, they've come back
Yeah,
and for a couple of these games since he's been there, and it's gone pretty well. He introduced stretching to this organization apparently for the first time ever, so that's a big deal. They probably think he's pretty innovative. If I was going to give a chance to anybody, it would be him. He's been there since 2019, and it seems like the guys are playing well under him. But realistically, no, I don't think any of these coaches are back next season.
I'm in the same spot. I would be hard pressed to see any of these three guys coming back. Thomas Brown, I really liked with Chicago how quickly he got Caleb Williams kind of back to competitive. But boy, that ugly first half against the 49ers alone, just that one half could be enough to completely kick him out of consideration. Not to mention, they're still not scoring a lot of points every week anyway. So I just don't see him staying around. But you're right, Coach D Rizzi there in New Orleans would be the one. But I think all three of these guys are going to move on. I think the franchises move on. All right, so those are the top five spots right there. We've got Jaguars, Giants, then the three that are open, Jets, Bears, Saints. Any final thoughts on those kind of five that we think are pretty much either red hot or done already?
All I'll say, can we get Thomas Brown like a real normal season as an offensive coordinator for the love of God? I mean, this guy does everything right that you're supposed to do under McVay. He goes to Carolina to be the OC, and then he's kind of the interim head coach, and then he's kind of the
Yeah.
play caller, and then he's kind of the OC, and that's a horrible situation. He goes to Chicago, and within 2 weeks, he goes from the pass game coordinator to the interim head coach. And can we find him a place to go for 1 full year and just be an offensive coordinator for the love of God? But in terms of these actual jobs, no, nothing else on these.
It's really not asking too much, is it? I mean, who else has a
No,
resume like Thomas Brown, right?
we're not even looking for like, oh, he needs his chance to be a head coach. No, just let him be an
Yeah.
offensive coordinator and play caller for 17 games. Just give me one season. Let's see what happens.
Let's move on to the big one here. I say the big one. It's the big brand anyway. There is no
Hmm.
bigger brand in football, maybe in North American sports. The Dallas Cowboys, Mike McCarthy. I've got a my opinion has changed on McCarthy over the past couple of weeks. Not McCarthy himself, but on what I would do if I were Dallas. But I want to know: do you think they're actually going to let him go? And then, what would you do if you were in charge there?
I'll start with the easier one, and it's if I was in charge, and I would move on from Mike McCarthy. And I think it goes down to the first 6 or 7 weeks, whatever it was before Dak got hurt, because now there's a lot of reasonable excuses you can make, right? Like Micah Parsons was hurt the first few games of the
Right.
season. CeeDee Lamb was banged up there in the middle for a little bit. DeMarcus Lawrence has been out all year. The defense has been hurt all year. And Dak Prescott has been out for, the second part of what we've played so far this season. So it's going to be pretty easy come January to write off what happened this year. But you have to remember the first 6 or 7 weeks of the year when this whole offense was pretty much healthy, it was miserable, right? And that's got to go down on McCarthy because last year we were singing his praises because the offense actually looked a little bit better when he was back in charge of the offense.
Right.
And if we're gonna, praise him when things go well, we've got to, hit him when things go bad too. So it does feel like it's time. It feels like there's been a brain drain of those coordinators that hasn't helped Dallas really overall, and there's been enough like disappointment that it feels like it's probably time to move on. But at the end of the day, I think Jerry's going to fall for it again. I think the excuses that I laid out are going to be ones that he can fall back into. Um, I hope we kind of go through this conversation, talk about this team like it's open, just because I do think it's an interesting conversation to have. But unfortunately, I think when it's all said and done, we might see McCarthy get another run at this just because of the injuries.
I think there's a very good chance he sticks around. Now, I personally have never been a huge McCarthy guy, especially in Green Bay. I just wasn't a huge fan of his work, especially considering it's not just that they didn't have a lot of success under Aaron Rodgers in the postseason. It's just I didn't see a lot of imaginative things there under McCarthy either. It's kind of like a good old football coach working with a great all-time great quarterback, and it produced a lot of regular season wins and I won Super Bowl, right? So that's kind of where I was. But I've liked his work in Dallas for the most part. He seems to have settled in there, even though this year, you're right, the offense, when healthy, did not look great. He even survived the threat of both of his coordinators being placed over him
Mm-hmm.
over the past year and a half. It could have
Oh
been
yeah.
Dan Quinn, and Quinn's moved on. So it's almost like he's survived that threat. At the moment, I would keep McCarthy. I could be talked out of it easily. At the moment, I would keep McCarthy because Dallas is such a unique place. A lot of the top guys just aren't going to want to go there. I don't think Ben Johnson would even consider going to Dallas personally. When you start to look at some of the other bigger names, if they've got another option, I think they maybe take the other option versus Dallas. So that thins down your pool. Now, we're going to talk more. I'll tell our audience this. We're going to talk more in our next
Mm-hmm.
episode about who those candidates are and who might actually show up in Dallas if McCarthy were gone. But to me, it's a thinner list. And so I'm like, man, dang it. I'm not sure I wouldn't just go through another year of McCarthy and Prescott since all the players are speaking up for him anyway.
Right.
And then check out next year's group of candidates because I liked last year's group of candidates a little better when it was led by Harbaugh and also Ben Johnson. And then you had the other guys coming in. That's where I'm at. I'm 50-50 on whether or not they're actually going to move on from him, though. I could see it either way. If I had to pick, I'd say they're going to stick with him. So that's where I'm at
Especially
on McCarthy.
because with McCarthy, there's not like one thing you can identify, right? That feel when you're
Yeah.
looking to change head coaches, you almost want to be able to find one thing that's like, okay, this is the thing that this last coach just didn't do for us, right? Whether it was we never figured out the offense, whether it was we were just never organized enough, whether it was we just weren't consistent week to week. We looked like a different team every single week. Our preparation was and it's the phrase popcorn. It's popcorn with McCarthy, right? Like the offense,
Mm-hmm.
it results in a lot of tight windows and a lot of like really constrained things. And you're like, okay, do we need a different offense or did we just get unlucky with the turnovers this year that we didn't last year because of the tightness, because of the constraints? It's one of the most heavily penalized teams in the entire league consistently. So, okay, is it an organizational thing? Is it like the preparation? Is it the attention to detail part? Okay, well, we're not really sure. Okay, the defense. Okay, well, we've changed defensive coordinators twice. So, what's the disconnect there from McCarthy? Is he not aligning the personnel to the right defensive coordinator that he's hiring? How much of that is he doing? How much of that is Jones? So because there's so many things that it's awkward because like there's so many things that feel wrong that actually makes it harder to feel like you could fire McCarthy, which it shouldn't be. Like if it's a train wreck, it's a train wreck. Just get a new
Right.
coach in. But I think all of those different things that are different year after year also, because it's not the same issues every single year, right? We have two different things coming up across the last 2 years or so. That plus the injuries from this year, it does feel like it'd be good to just kind of bring everybody back. Not feel good. It does feel right that what will happen is we'll bring everybody back. We'll try again next year, and we'll really try to see what the real problem with 2024 was.
It's also even harder. Some of the guys we'll be looking at for candidates are retreads, if you will, with some
Right.
success, but no more success than McCarthy's got on his resume. I
Hmm.
mean, in most cases, there's a couple of exceptions. And so McCarthy's got all these regular season win totals, even with Dallas, and it makes it more difficult to just say, well, he's the problem. I mean, they're still going to have the cap issues and the cap restrictions that they're working with. So we'll find out about Dallas for sure. Jerry Jones will make a decision at some point. Let's move on to another big one here. The Cincinnati Bengals. On two of my other shows that I do, three of the other guys I worked with already fired Zach Taylor. Okay, so just to lay the foundation for you here, man. I mean, they're already out on him. I'm split on him, even though I wasn't a huge Taylor guy in the first place when they first hired him. So where are you on how likely and what would you do with the Bengals job?
I don't get that, man. Zach Taylor, he has continuously, it feels like, gotten better at the things he wasn't so good at when he started out as the Bengals head coach. And this offense, despite having a horrible defense dragging it down, is better than it was last year. And maybe those guys and others are real big Dan Pinter fans, the new offensive coordinator that took over Brian Callahan, and he is somebody that or pitcher, sorry, who was on a lot of lists last year as kind of this like rising star kind of guy. But Zach Taylor is still the guy that's like pointing everything in the right direction, and I just don't one really bad season where it's like very clear and identifiable that the defense has completely fallen off. I don't see where that goes now. And I know there's been a decline, right? So 2021 they go to the Super Bowl, 10 wins. The next year they go to the AFC Championship game, 12 wins. Last year 9 wins, but that's 9 wins where Joe Burrow missed what, half the season? And now this year where the defense is maybe the worst defense we've seen in the last 2 or 3 seasons in the entire NFL. They're still a top 5 offense, and they've got 5 wins right now. Like I'm not changing anything right now, because he's also not the one with the pocketbook to make the personnel decisions either. Ask him if he would want to go out and replenish the defense with younger, more expensive talent and or keep T. Higgins. Of course he would. Absolutely he would. He doesn't make that decision. So we'll see what happens with the defense this year. I'm sure Lou Anarumo is going to be losing his job. So give Taylor a chance to find a defensive coordinator, maybe change out some defensive pieces with whether it's him doing it, whether it's the front office fully doing it. I mean, such a small operation there that everybody is equally in charge of everything, it feels like. Um, but get this defense back to middling, not even just average. Get it back to middling, and then we can assess Zach Taylor after another year.
If I knew for sure I could collect Ben Johnson and put him at my head coaching position, I would let Zach Taylor go. That's hard to know for sure, but I really don't think Ben Johnson could resist getting to work with Joe Burrow. I will ask you though, you're a big Vrabel guy, and I like Vrabel
Hmm.
too. If you knew you could get Vrabel in there, and he's kind of got the energy and the defensive mindset, but now he's got the best quarterback he'll ever have, would you make the switch if you knew you could pull Vrabel in?
I don't think so. Vrabel hasn't, and I was listening to the Athletic Football Show. They did a really good pod on all the coaching stuff as well, and they were talking about this, and you kind of go through in your head, and you're like, wow, Vrabel hasn't found a good offensive coordinator since Arthur Smith left for that Tennessee, right? I think he tried 2 different guys at the end of Tennessee after Arthur Smith, and it didn't work out. I don't want to risk the offense that I have by putting a defensive coach on it who might cap it. Like, how many times have we seen defensive coordinators go to offensive teams and we're like, the offense is already good, so that'll take care of itself. When in reality, the defensive coach changes the whole mindset of everything and maybe takes away from some of the offensive resources and puts it to the defense. And with Vrabel, maybe he would look at this veteran defense, be like, no, these guys are all great. Let's keep everybody. And then we don't have any changes that the defensive roster sorely needs. So no, I wouldn't like Vrabel as a fit for here.
Fair enough. Let's move on to some more iffy teams. We've kind of covered some of the hot spots here. I'm going to real quick. The Philadelphia Eagles, and again, at the moment, there's no danger, but you and I have talked about this off air. If the Eagles were to kind of slide toward the end of the season and then get that horrific first round exit again, God forbid it be to Tampa Bay again, right? But and you have kind of the ongoing locker room issues that kind of seem to always be in Philadelphia. Is that enough for Sirianni to be heading out the door?
Yeah, I think so. And rightfully or wrongfully isn't really the case here, but I think that would happen again. Because look, Jason Kelsey has said when they were 10-1 last year, they were a miserable team. And yeah, I know they're 11-2 this year, and everything looks great. But don't forget, man, weeks 4, week 5 during the bye week, week 6, we were wondering if Sirianni was still going to be the coach of this team. And I know they're playing great, but how much do you put that on the coordinators? How much obviously does that just go to the players? Like we have all the same questions about Sirianni that we did 8 weeks ago. So the both good and bad, but so the wins, right now are great. Regular season wins are great. But this team is the team that moved on from Andy Reid, right? This is the team that fired Doug Peterson a year and a half after he won a Super Bowl. Like, good isn't going to cut it. So they looked at Bill Belichick this year. So yeah, I think this is the team that, they've got 4 games left, 3 divisional games. If they go 2-2, the vibes stay bad, and they flame out in the first round. I think Sirianni's probably gone.
I would tend to agree. They are on thin ice there. Sirianni is on thin ice. I know this is a beautiful win streak that they're on, and I think they're a legit Super Bowl contender at the moment. But you're always just a couple of losses and a Barkley injury and a Sirianni decision away from Sirianni just being right out the door. So stay tuned
And
on
again,
that.
rightfully or wrongfully, like this isn't even saying like he should like this is the reality of coaching in Philly. This is the reality of what the reality is for Sirianni right now. I don't know if I could tell you whether or not I think he's a very good coach. I think obviously, I mean, all these double digit win seasons, like they've gone to the playoffs every single year he's been there. So I, I think he's a good coach, but the situation with him involved is not a solid one.
Let's clear out a little bit of clutter and then get to our kind of final one or two teams. Miami Dolphins with Mike McDaniel, the Cleveland Browns with Stefanski, and the Titans with Callahan. I know he's only been there 1 year, but any of those three teams pique your interest as, hey, here's what it would take for that coach to be gone this year?
I think McDaniel's probably surviving at this point. It seems like they've gotten on the other end of the Tua injury stuff and have done some things that they weren't doing at the beginning of the season before he got hurt. Because that was the thing for me when he went down, it didn't feel like they had a viable offense for any quarterback that wasn't Tua. But since he's been back, they've made some adjustments, so it looks like he's actually has a little more of a second pitch that he wasn't doing early in the season. So for what I don't know why he couldn't do that with a backup if he just didn't try, but whatever, that doesn't matter. So I think he's safe. Um, the Browns, you know, I I think it would be an embarrassment for this franchise if Stefanski was the one that got scapegoated for everything that's happened this year. But from Connor Orr from CBS is the one that does these really, really in-depth coaching pieces around this time of year every year. Was on that episode of the Athletic Football Show, and he was just telling people are saying like, just keep in mind the Browns. Like, and again, rightfully, wrongfully, we don't know how much Stefanski was behind the Deshaun Watson decision, but it just everything there is just kind of ripe for a change could happen. Again, this would not be on him. And part of the reason he might get moved on from is because they could actually get a lot for him. Like, look for this to maybe be a trade scenario where they decide they have to keep Watson because of the financial aspects, but to recoup some of those draft picks because they need changes, they trade Stefanski for 2 picks. So we'll talk a little bit more about Stefanski maybe later on. But from a coaching perspective and what he's doing with the team, Stefanski should be completely safe. But the environment and what's happening in Cleveland is maybe the reason he's going. And then the Titans. The Titans are interesting. You know me, I'm not usually the fire guy after 1 year guy. But
Right.
Brian Callahan was like the least inspired hiring from last year all the way around, right? And
Yes.
despite the offensive roster that they put together to start the season, which fell apart very quickly, and this despite the fact that this defense has been top 10 all season long, like they have 3 wins. And if he's the guy that got this job here because he's the one of just a couple candidates that liked Will Levis, and we've seen what's happened with Will Levis this year, like what does that say? And what does that say about his security moving forward? So this is the one that you kind of look at sideways and you're like, what are we really doing here for the Titans? So there, I'm not saying this is what I would do, but again, if the big thing for Callahan was like he had a plan for Levis, and now we feel like we're moving on from Levis, do we also move on from Callahan this early?
Dolphins, Browns, Titans. If I were any of those three GM slash owners, I would be keeping all three of these head coaches for next year. I wouldn't move off of any of them. In some cases, like Tennessee, it would be only for stability's sake, not to be changing up things too quickly. In other cases, Cleveland, I don't know that I can get anybody else necessarily better in there. I might get something different, but I don't know that I can get anything necessarily better in the door than what I already like Stefanski for. I will say, though, Cleveland here, Their owner, Jimmy Haslam, he has got a large reputation. I mean, just as bad as Tepper out in Carolina, just as bad
Hmm.
as any owner you want to put out there. He's got a revolving door reputation. I mean, he
Hmm.
comes over from a business where he's made a killing for years, and he just believes in making changes. He believes in dropping the hammer. So it wouldn't surprise me if they drop him, but I don't think the Browns ought to move off Stefanski at all. I think they should go ahead and just lock him up for another 2 or 3 years, get this Watson contract off the books at some point when it starts to make at least a little bit of sense, at least Russell Wilson sense, right? At least that kind of sense. And it's not even there yet. And then start to kind of make your next moves. But I would not move off of Stefanski.
Real quick
Last
for
two,
you for the Titans, you're saying you're in favor of Brian Callahan staying. I know you and I would both like to probably sit down with a little more time and space and watch some more Will Levis film before like officially saying if we're completely done with this guy or not. But if you're Rand Carthan, if you're the GM of the Titans and you're saying I want to keep Brian Callahan, is that because A, you think you want to give Levis another shot? B, you want to draft a QB this year and say, Brian Callahan, giving you our rookie quarterback to mold? Or C, hey, Will Levis was so bad this year, and I don't know if Callahan is the right guy to mold a young quarterback. So let me give him a bridge quarterback for a season or two and just see what he does with like a normal, a Sam Darnold type situation where I can really evaluate everything else he's doing as a coach.
if I'm Rand Carthan, I'll keep Callahan strictly because of stability, not related to anything Levis or even related to who else I might bring in. It's just, hey, I'm not a big fan of swapping guys out, even after 2 years, really, but especially not after 1 year. If I'm Rand Carthan, though, just to touch on that quarterback situation real quick, I'll keep Will Levis. He's shown me enough where I'll keep him around for next year. But I am not going to go in with him as being as my even primary guy necessarily. I'm going to bring in a veteran to compete with him, and I have no problem drafting a guy in, say, the late second or early third round to also come in. We'll throw the competition wide open. Callahan will pick the guy he wants to move forward with for next year. And then that'll kind of be on Callahan whether or not he keeps his job after next season, right? Because I gave him 3 different options.
Hmm.
That's where I would go with next season, Callahan and the quarterbacks myself.
All right.
2 teams left, man. The Raiders and the Colts. I think I already know what you're going to say, but lay us out what you think will happen with both organizations and what you would do.
Yeah, I think Shane Steichen's totally safe, and I would mark him as totally safe for myself as well. Weird year, but he still has the Colts very much in the thick of it. We'll see what happens here on Sunday against the Broncos, or I guess we're probably putting this out after the game. So depending on what happens Sunday against the Broncos, they're still very much in the thick of it or not. But I think he's safe regardless. And then for the Raiders. Listen, I don't think Antonio Pierce is a bad coach, but I also don't think he's quite ready to be a head coach. He kept this team afloat for the last 14 months, but the offensive staff has turned over twice in that amount of time, right? He kind of changed it after McDaniels was let go with some other offensive staff, and then Antonio Pierce pretty much fired everybody he hired mid-season this year. So I just don't think there's the stability and the experience to put together a staff if I'm going to be drafting a quarterback number one or number two overall. Um, and because I don't think he would provide that stability, I'm just not even going to put that rookie quarterback in the situation. So this isn't an anti-Pierce thing. I love Antonio Pierce. I think he's going to be a good coach at some point. But if I'm going to draft a quarterback here pretty early, I'm going to move on from Antonio Pierce and make sure I feel like I'm in good footing, good standing with my head coach.
My thoughts on the Colts is I would keep Shane Steichen. I would keep the GM. There's no chance, absolutely none, that I'm going to move off of those guys and have Anthony Richardson go into his third season, still needing more experience, and now having to do it with a whole new coaching staff. There's
Yep.
absolutely no chance. So we are going to rock and roll next year with Ballard and with
Steichen. Hmm.
Steichen and with Richardson. That's what we're doing next year. There is no backup plan. We're going in with that, and that's it. I might bring in a somewhat of a veteran backup, not to overshadow Richardson, but just hey, if Richardson gets injured, I've got a decent, sub, but that's it. That's what I'm doing. But we've been hearing whispers now for probably a year that Irsay, the owner, who's erratic in his own right, the owner of the
Yep.
Colts, he's a loose cannon. He is not the easiest owner to work for. That he is not overly happy with Ballard. We've kind of heard the Ballard whispers now for about a year. I'm fine with Ballard, but the Irsay Ballard thing,
Hmm.
don't be surprised if the Colts actually miss the playoffs and don't look too great doing it. If there's not a shakeup with Ballard, and then that just throws Steichen out along with it, really unrelated to much of anything that Shane Steichen is doing. On the Raiders thing, it's so tough when you're an interim guy to even get to keep that job. Antonio Pierce brought the energy last year. He kept the job. And I hate it because he doesn't have a good enough roster to be working with. It's just not really fair. But
Hmm.
he kind of had his chance and he didn't really show much, right? I mean, they're still among the worst teams in football. You haven't seen anything better this year than what they had last year. So unfortunately, I think because I've got good ownership there in the Raiders, I think I can get a good head coaching candidate there with the Raiders. I think I can step my game up. And it may be that Pierce comes back in 4 years somewhere else and does catch a head coaching job and does an excellent job with it. But man, if I'm the Raiders, I could be talked into moving off of Pierce or keeping him either one. But I actually think I can get better head coaching candidates there if I am the Raiders. All right, final thoughts on these 13 jobs that we've covered.
It's weird, man. We'll get into it in the next one, but these don't feel all that fun, and that's I guess what's supposed to happen when guys are getting fired and guys are losing jobs. But usually there's one or two that it feels like it's a great job. I don't know how I feel about many of these moving forward, but we'll hit that in the next video.
You and I didn't talk about this off air, so I didn't prep you for it. We've been hearing from the media for probably 2 months now that it's going to be about eight, nine, ten
Mm-hmm.
jobs open up. I'm a little lower than that. I'm going to ask you in a second where you're at on it. I think there's five for sure, and it'll probably kind of mushroom to six or seven. That's about where I'm at. Are you pushing any more than that, closer to that 10 range?
I don't think I'm up to 10. Connor Orr, again from CBS Sports, said he was hearing 8 to 10 from people in like with teams is what he was expecting, like talking to various GMs and personnel departments. Um, and for whatever it's worth, Robert Mays of The Athletic during the show was saying he was hearing 7 or 10, 7 to 10 in that range too. I do think it'll be on the lower end, but look, we're always surprised by something, right? So I mean, we mentioned obviously the three interim jobs that are already happening. We mentioned the Jaguars as a likely four. If we say the Raiders are five, pick one of the Giants or Cowboys, they're six. And then it just takes one more, one or two ones that we don't really see coming. But yeah, I'd say lower end. I'd say probably seven is my like sweet spot.
All right, and I'm still going to stay on my six or seven. I can't see nine or 10 this year. When I look at the candidate pool
Hmm.
and where some of these franchises are sitting right now with good possibilities for next year, it's not like some of them are in dire straits. So we'll see. That's what we do it for. All right, this is the Box Score Network, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Please check out all of our other stuff on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Have a great one. Goodbye.